Listen to this. Welcome back to Harvard. The blame for Hillary Clinton's use of private email continues. Secretary Clinton began using a personal email server and personal email account upon taking office in January 2009. So from the beginning of her service as Secretary of State, she used a private server, private email. We got this as a fact. We got to get facts on the table then. According to author Joe Conason in a brand new book, Mrs. Clinton, early in her term as Secretary of State, attended a dinner hosted by Madeleine Albright, another former Secretary of State. Conason writes, quote, toward the end of the evening over dessert, Albright asked all the former secretaries of state in attendance to offer one salient bit of counsel to the nation's new next top diplomat. And Powell told her to use her own email, as he had done, except for classified communications, which he had sent and received via a State Department computer. Well, according to Madeleine Albright, I guess she's the source. I don't know. It's certainly Joe Conason wrote this account at her house, based on her own. Anyway, on Friday, Powell's office told NBC News, quote, he did write former Secretary Clinton an memo describing the use of his personal AOL account for unclassified messages and how it vastly improved communications within the State Department. On Saturday night at a party in the Hamptons, Powell went further. He told People magazine, quote, her people have been trying to pin it on me. The truth is, she was using the private email server for a year before I sent her a memo telling her what I did. Well, joining me for tonight's roundtable, Jason Johnson's politics editor for The Root, Colin McCain-Nelson is White House correspondent for The Wall Street Journal, and Michael Steele is a former senior advisor to Jeb Bush, and he's also a spokesman at one time for former House Speaker John Boehner. So what do we make of this? Because I'm trying to put them all together. Hillary Clinton, we know, is a factor. She said so. I've been using this private server since I became Secretary of State. There's this party which she was at, apparently, in which someone said that someone told Joe Conason, maybe it was Madeleine Albright, that Madeleine Albright asked everybody to give their advice, and one of the bits of advice was from Colin Powell, who said, use a private email server, or your private email for your unclassified stuff. And then now Powell comes out on Saturday night and tells a People magazine reporter, who does the kind of person who would show up at a party, no, it was a year later. So what do we make of this?
Well, many things we know to be...
Is this a fact argument?
Well, here are the facts. She was already using the server before he said anything, regardless of when he wrote the memo.
What about the party where they said that she was the next Secretary of State? Well, the term next means she hasn't quite taken office yet. Right? Just a minute. Just one person.
Well, the timing of the party seems to be in question, but he says he wrote a memo long after she was already doing this. I mean, she was doing it from the beginning. And,
that's what he said.
And there are key differences.
So if you trust Powell, and you believe Powell is right about the email, then you can't believe Hillary Clinton when she blames her decision on his decision earlier.
Right. And also, it's important to note that what she did and what he did are different, because he used a private email account for some of his communications. He used a State Department computer for classified communication. At that point, there were not email rules in place.
But we don't have to get to that point of distinction. Jason,
but these are important distinctions.
If we simply go to the fact, no, we don't have to go to that distinction if it's clear that she never did anything based on his experience or advice.
Right, and that's what I think.
That's where the blame game comes in.
Exactly.
Even if it's only part of this, it's only the email, not the server. If she did it on her own because she wanted to do it, she and Bill or whoever else decided it, that was her decision, why is she blaming it on Colin Powell?
Because I think it's easy and it's convenient and they're grasping at straws, and they didn't think this would still be an issue 79, 78 days before the election. And Colin Powell's like, I'm not involved in this. You know, it's like you
usually if you're going to blame it on somebody else, Michael, you figure they'll go along with it.
Well, yeah,
they'll say,
they are trying to rent the credibility of a distinguished public servant, a Republican, a statesman, as a talking point to explain this away. And look, Colin Powell wasn't looking for this fight. He's going to a party on a Saturday night, and somebody who's, snapping pictures on the red carpet asks him about it, and his response is, no, I'm not responsible for this. So they rented his credibility for a talking point, and he called him on it.
Why is this story, why is this story, which is difficult to get excited about, email? I know everybody jumps up and down and says scandal, scandal, scandal. But we know what happened. It's now been digested by every American. Hillary Clinton chose a secretive method of doing phone calls. She decided she'd do it secretly. It's some risk to being hijacked by somebody. But she made that decision. She's apologized for it numerous times. Where do we go from that? Isn't that the end of it?
Well, the problem she keeps running into is she has apologized for it, and she and her aides keep saying that she's taking responsibility for it, but instead of taking responsibility for it entirely, they keep trying to have other people vouch for her. Yeah. And so in this scenario, she's trying to suggest that Colin Powell would vouch for her, which he won't. And she also tried to suggest that Comey, the director of the FBI, would vouch for her, and when she suggested that he said everything she said was truthful, which is not what he said. And so if she would just take responsibility for it and say, look, what I did was different than what any other Secretary of State did, and it was a mistake, that would be one thing. But when she keeps trying to rope other people in and say they
okay,
agree
let me give you an historic pattern here, which I can understand her point of view. You know, after Nixon was caught taping, everybody, all the people like Arthur Schlesinger and all the great liberals said, oh, there's no way anybody would live. Kennedy taped over and over again. Johnson taped over and over again. And apparently Johnson recommended to Nixon tape. So this kind of phoniness that goes on, I would never do that. Maybe that's what she's reacting to. Oh, yeah, well, I found out Colin used to do it, too. So I don't care if he did it 5 times. I'm still going to share some of the guilt.
Well, it's partially that, and partially just the Clintons are so defensive about simple things. And like we mentioned before, it's the cover-up. You know, it's not just an issue of sort of admitting responsibility, which she should say, and this is kind of risky, but she should come out and say it. It's like, look, I did this. It may have been a mistake. Did it cost anybody anything? What's the big deal? Kind of like what she said in the Benghazi hearings, because at the end of the day, I think the reason it hasn't caught fire with a lot of voters is no one's been able to make a connection between her use of the email servers and something that actually endangered the American people. No one's been able to say, hey, she got hacked.
I know why she doesn't do this. Because they'll think of something else to do her with this. Because every time she says one thing, they'll find something else. It keeps growing.
Well, and that's because
release the transcripts. Remember the speeches?
It's evidence.
Bernie did that. The whole campaign.
It's evidence of an error in judgment related to national security. And if you're trying to make the argument that you're ready to be commander-in-chief because of your judgment and experience in the area of national security, something that raises this kind of questions about your judgment is not going to go away.
By the way, that's something. Did anybody ever go to the former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and say to her, you're not supposed to use a private email server. It's the new rules of the State Department prohibited. Did anyone ever have such a conversation?
If they didn't, it's certainly a problem.
No, but that they didn't, that tells you something, too.
Yeah.
Right.
How come that never happened?
Well, there were people who apparently suggested that it may have not been a good idea, but we don't have anything on paper where someone's like, hey, stop it, here's a new memo, here's the rule. And that's one of the reasons why she's...
I know ignorance of the law is no excuse, but at some point there ought to be some information delivered to the Secretary of State, you're doing something wrong. And if that ever happened, that person should stand up now and say, I told her not to do it. It was improper. It never happened, did it? We don't know if it ever happened.
There was buried in her 33,000 emails that we have seen. There was one email where a staffer suggested that she might want to have a State Department email address. It wasn't saying you need to do this, you're breaking the rules, but it was a suggestion which she did not take.
There was also a person told not to say that to her. Anyway, much more ahead with the roundtable. This is Hardball, the place for politics.